When American engineers first introduced the idea of a cheap, single-use, mass-produced submachine gun made mostly from stamped metal, the German officers who heard about it simply laughed. They believed no serious army would rely on such a crude device. Their own doctrine valued precision craftsmanship, fine machining, tight tolerances, and expensive steel. To them, the American concept sounded like a child's toy, not a battlefield weapon. But on the other side of the ocean, in crowded workshops lit by the glow of welding torches, American workers were building something different. Not elegant, not refined, but terrifyingly practical. It was called the M3 grease gun. Designed in 1942, it used stamped steel parts that fit together like puzzle pieces. No wooden stock, no polished surfaces, no complex mechanisms. Just a simple trigger, a heavy bolt, and a slow but steady rate of fire. It cost barely a fraction of what a Thompson submachine gun cost, and it could be taught to a new soldier in minutes. When the first M3S arrived in Europe in 1944, most German troops didn't even recognize it. Soldiers who captured one dismissed it instantly. "This," one officer reportedly said, "this is what America sends to war?" The gun looked like a workshop prototype, a product rushed straight from a factory floor to the front line without refinement. But soon the laughter faded. American armored crews discovered that the M3's compact frame was perfect inside tanks where space was tight. Airborne units found that its slow, heavy shot gave excellent control in close-quarters fighting. And infantry squads realized that, unlike many German weapons, the M3 worked even after being dragged through mud or frozen in snow. German reports from late 1944 quietly admitted what their pride had refused to consider. The impossible weapon worked. It wasn't beautiful, but it was reliable, cheap, and easy to replace. In a war of industrial output, that mattered far more than elegance. Ironically, Germany would end up capturing tens of thousands of these inferior American guns during the chaos of the Ardennes and later battles. But they never used them widely. Not because the gun was useless, but because it represented everything their war machine had failed to understand: simplicity, mass production, and practicality over perfection. In the end, the M3 symbolized a deeper truth of the Second World War. Victory didn't always belong to the side with the most advanced equipment. Sometimes it belonged to the side that could produce a weapon that simply worked in huge numbers under any condition. And the weapon Germany once mocked as impossible became one of the clearest reminders of how dangerous it is to underestimate your enemy. Not their intelligence, not their factories, and certainly not their ability to turn a simple metal tube into a tool that could change the battlefield. The first real test of America's so-called impossible weapon came in the hedgerows of Normandy. In June 1944, American infantry pushed through the thick, overgrown French countryside, where every field was a trap and every intersection could hide a German machine gun nest. Soldiers who had just landed under fire were still learning to trust the strange, grease-covered gun in their hands. In the early days of the campaign, a squad from the 90th Infantry Division found itself pinned behind a collapsed stone wall. A German MG-42, firing at a terrifying 1,200 rounds per minute, sliced through branches and brick like scissors through paper. The Americans were trapped, unable to move, unable to raise their heads. In moments like this, the M3 grease gun would prove what it truly was. Private Sam Wilson, barely 20 years old, crawled forward through the dirt. He was shaking, not from fear alone, but from the memory of German officers mocking the weapon they carried. He had heard stories that the M3 was nothing but cheap metal, that it jammed, that it was more like a garage tool than a battlefield firearm. But now, pressed against the earth, the gun felt solid in his hands. Wilson waited for the MG-42 to reload. When the firing stopped, he sprang forward into a ditch, closing the distance to just a few meters. The German crew did not expect an American to charge them with a weapon so crude, so underestimated. The moment the gunner lifted his head, Wilson squeezed the trigger. The M3's slow, heavy rounds didn't scream like the MG-42. They thudded, each shot hitting with controlled, deliberate force. The entire burst lasted only a second, but it was enough. The German crew fell back, stunned by the speed and violence of the counterattack. For the first time, they saw the weapon they had dismissed as a joke show its true purpose: close-quarters dominance. Word spread quickly. Tank crews learned that the M3 could fire even after being dragged from burning vehicles. Paratroopers discovered it could survive a hard landing, bent metal and all, and still deliver deadly bursts in ruined towns. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, soldiers used the gun's slow rate of fire to conserve ammunition during desperate defensive fights. German commanders began to note a pattern. Wherever the fighting compressed into tight, brutal spaces, inside bunkers, through alleyways, among shattered farmhouses, the Americans with the ugly metal gun pushed forward with frightening effectiveness. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't elegant, but it was becoming a weapon that defined the chaos of close-range war. Captured German diaries from late 1944 contain quiet admissions. The American steel tube, one soldier wrote, is more dangerous than it looks. Another confessed, we underestimated it. That was our mistake. The M3's baptism by fire wasn't just its arrival on the battlefield. It was the moment it shattered the myth that only polished, precision-made weapons could dominate a war. The grease gun proved that a simple idea, mass-produced and brutally practical, could shock an entire army that thought it had seen everything. By the winter of 1944, German soldiers were encountering a strange pattern on the Western Front. Whenever American positions were overrun, whether in sudden night raids, ambushes, or chaotic retreats, the Germans kept finding the same weapon abandoned in large numbers. It was small, made of stamped metal and covered in grease. At first, many German troops tossed it aside, assuming it was another example of rushed American manufacturing. But as the war intensified, frontline units began collecting these weapons by the thousands. The largest haul came during the early days of the Battle of the Bulge. When German forces launched their surprise offensive through the Ardennes, they overran several American supply depots. Among crates of ammunition, fuel, and rations, they found an unexpected treasure: entire pallets of M3 submachine guns. Reports from the German 5th Panzer Army indicated that some units captured more than they could even transport. Soldiers stuffed them into trucks, half-tracks, and even tied them to the backs of tanks. By the time the offensive stalled, German forces had seized nearly 20,000 of these American weapons. The irony was sharp. Germany, once proud of its engineering masterpieces like the MP-40 and the MG-42, now relied on a weapon they had mocked as primitive and cheap. But desperation has a way of stripping away arrogance. On the battlefield, ammunition shortages pushed German units to seek any weapon that fired standard 9mm rounds. And the M3, crude as it appeared, came with something priceless: American supply dumps filled with compatible ammo. But there was another reason the Germans took so many. The M3's slow rate of fire, half that of the MP-40, made it surprisingly controllable in close combat. In the cramped forests and villages where much of the fighting took place, this steadiness mattered. German soldiers found that inexperienced troops could fire it more effectively than their own submachine guns, which required more discipline to control under stress. One German sergeant wrote in his diary, "It is ugly, but it works. In this war, that is enough." Yet, for all this practicality, many of the captured guns were never fully adopted. Some German units used them for a few days, then discarded them again. Others hoarded them in storage, unsure if they would ever be needed. The chaos of retreat meant that captured weapons moved from unit to unit without documentation, becoming ghosts in logistics reports. After the Ardennes offensive collapsed, retreating troops left thousands of captured M3s behind. Some had been used. Many had never even been fired. Others were tossed into ditches, abandoned on roadsides, or stacked in piles when ammunition ran out. It was a strange picture. An army starving for equipment, capturing tens of thousands of functional weapons, then often discarding them just as quickly. Why? The truth was simple. Germany had no time, no stable supply lines, no centralized system capable of integrating foreign weapons at such enormous scale, and no hope left for the kind of long war these guns were designed to fight. By early 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing faster than any weapon, American or German, could change the outcome. The M3s they captured became symbols of a dying army, an army desperately grabbing anything it could, only to watch the war crush those efforts into dust. In the end, Germany captured 20,000 American guns, and it mattered about as much as capturing a bucket of water in a burning house. By early 1945, the German army was drowning. The Reich that once boasted about engineering perfection and military discipline now had soldiers marching with mismatched boots, rifles from 4 different countries, and ammunition that never seemed to fit the gun in their hands. Into this chaos came thousands of captured American M3 submachine guns, spoils of the Ardennes offensive, seized in abandoned trucks, crates, and broken depots. At first, German soldiers treated these weapons like prizes. They had captured them from the Americans during a rare moment of offensive success, and anything taken from the enemy carried a sense of pride. Some frontline troops even posed for photographs holding the strange, stamped metal American gun, joking about its crude appearance. But the excitement faded almost immediately, because reality, as always, was merciless. Most German units had no idea how to use the M3 properly. There were no manuals, no training, and no time to figure out the quirks of a foreign weapon while under artillery fire. Many guns arrived without magazines, spare parts, or sling attachments. Others were caked in grease, as they were meant to be cleaned before field use. Troops often mistook this for poor quality. Worse still, ammunition compatibility. Ironically, the M3's strongest advantage became its biggest obstacle. The Germans did use 9mm rounds, but frontline units had almost none left by 1945. Even after capturing crates of ammo from American depots, the chaotic retreat made it nearly impossible to distribute supplies. A unit that captured 50 M3s might only have enough ammunition for 5. The rest were dead weight, so they began piling them in barns, roadside trenches, abandoned farmhouses. Hundreds of submachine guns lying in heaps, unused and unwanted. Another problem soon became obvious: maintenance. The M3 was simple, but it still needed basic upkeep. The charging crank broke easily. The magazine lips bent if handled roughly. The wire stock jammed with mud. German soldiers, exhausted and half-starved, had no energy to care for their own rifles, let alone foreign ones with unfamiliar mechanisms. By February 1945, the situation collapsed completely. German supply officers ordered many captured weapons destroyed on the spot. Better to smash them with truck axles or bury them than carry extra weight during the chaotic retreats across the Rhine. Infantry squads would toss M3s into rivers, leave them in forests, or abandon them in fields already littered with burned-out equipment. They had become what soldiers bitterly called Wertlos Trophäen, worthless trophies. As the Allies advanced, they encountered bizarre scenes. Piles of perfectly functional American submachine guns deserted by the very army that had proudly seized them weeks earlier. In some towns, U.S. units recovered their own equipment without a single round fired through it. The irony was painful. Germany captured a mountain of enemy weapons, but lacked the time, fuel, logistics, and stability to use them. A collapsing army cannot repurpose anything, not even 20,000 reliable guns. The Reich had passed the point where equipment mattered. What they lacked was the one resource no weapon could supply: time. By the end of the war, the M3s they threw away became symbols of a nation fighting with shadows, grasping at anything to slow the inevitable. They were trophies no one could afford to carry, relics of a last, doomed gamble. In the ruins of 1945, the Germans didn't need more weapons. They needed a miracle, and none came. When the M3 submachine gun entered the American arsenal, many officers dismissed it as a ridiculous idea. A stamped steel gun? A weapon built almost like a toy, cheap enough to be produced faster than replacement parts for older rifles? To traditionalists, it felt like an insult to American craftsmanship. Some even called it the gun that shouldn't exist. And yet, war has a sense of humor, often a cruel one. By late 1944, the European battlefield had turned into a chaotic, close-quarters hellscape. Towns, hedgerows, forests, the kind of terrain where long rifles became liabilities. American infantry needed something light, fast, and utterly reliable in mud, snow, and rubble. And suddenly, the impossible gun found its purpose. The first major test came during the brutal fighting in the Hurtgen forest. Rain turned every trench into a swamp. Fog swallowed entire platoons. Rifles jammed from dirt and moisture. But the M3, with its simple blowback system and loose tolerances, kept firing. Soldiers who had mocked it now passed it around like a treasure. Engineers had created it to be cheap. Instead, they accidentally built a weapon perfect for the nightmare unfolding around them. A month later, during the Battle of the Bulge, its reputation hardened into legend. In the ruined Belgian village of Rocherath, a squad from the 2nd Infantry Division found themselves surrounded by German paratroopers. Their radios were dead, their rifles nearly frozen from the cold. But each man carrying an M3 discovered something important. The gun didn't care about the weather. It fired even when ice clung to the barrel. This grease thickened, but did not stop the mechanism. At close range, its steady, low-rate burst tore through German assaults again and again. The irony deepened when captured German soldiers admitted something stunning. They feared the M3 more than many heavier American weapons. Its slow, metallic clack-clack-clack echoed through fog and ruined streets like a mechanical heartbeat. To them, it sounded relentless. But the true twist came after the Ardennes fighting ended. Thousands of M3s were abandoned during chaotic retreats. When the Germans captured them, they assumed the weapons were junk. Stamped metal? Loose construction? Strange shape? It must be inferior, so they ignored it. And this mistake cost them dearly. While German units wasted time repairing complex MP-40s with parts they no longer had, American troops armed with M3s pushed forward with a weapon that demanded almost nothing. No precision machining, minimal maintenance, and the ability to fire 9mm ammo already carried by countless support units. Every battle revealed a deeper truth. It wasn't the most beautiful weapon, nor the most accurate, but it was the one that never quit. By crossing the Rhine, American infantry had fully embraced the M3. It was in every ruined farmhouse, every close-quarters assault, every night raid on German positions. The gun built from stamped steel became a symbol of American adaptability, something the Reich could no longer match. The ultimate irony? A weapon born from the need to save money and production time ended up shaping the outcome of the war more than many polished, expensive designs. The Germans had called it impossible. The Americans had doubted it. But the battlefield proved something simple. War doesn't reward perfection. It rewards what survives. And the M3 survived everything.